Hello, sir. Ẹ káàárọ̀, sir. Mo ní ṣé ẹ ti wọlé? Okay. Okay. Màá make yín co-host nísìnyí so that màá lè fi wọn sílẹ̀. Okay. Hello, sir. Ẹ káàárọ̀, sir. Mo ní ṣé ẹ ti wọlé? Okay. Màá make yín co-host nísìnyí so that.
Dr. Ilami, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Good, good morning, class. Can you
Good
guys
morning,
hear
sir.
me? Yeah, good.
Yes, sir.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Mute yourself. Mute yourself. If you want to, okay. So, I want to continue from where I stopped last week. And of course, before we start on a new topic, let me try to conclude what I started last week. Now, I want to talk about, I actually started discussing the role of assumption in economics. The role of assumption in economics. And of course, I said, let me also recap. Economic model are simplified.
Bluetooth.
Economic model.
Enjoy your music.
The role of assumptions in economic modeling. In economic modeling. And of course, let me state this clearly, that economic models are simplified representations of reality used to analyze complex economic processes. So assumption play a very crucial role in constructing this model, because we know that the reality, if you want to capture what is happening in reality, is very complex. In order to simplify it, we need to make some assumptions. So assumption play a crucial role in constructing economic models. It helps economists to focus on key relationships, while ignoring those relationships or things that are irrelevant, or some things that are not, quite useful. So now, because I said something about why are assumptions necessary in economic modeling? Why are assumptions necessary in economic modeling? First of all, economic reality is highly complex, just like I said, involving numerous variables and interdependencies. Economic reality is highly complex. Because it involves numerous variables. And interdependencies. 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 Economic reality is highly complex because it involves all these critical elements here. Numerous variables as well as interdependencies. An example of that is what I said the other day, that if you talk about demand, for instance, demand is being influenced by various factors. Demand, for instance, demand is a function of numerous factors. It's been influenced by different factors like price, population, income, so on and so forth. You can see that what I've said is exactly what is happening here. This is economic reality. It involves numerous variables. You can see that what is affecting this, what can affect our demand, can be influenced by various factors. It can be influenced by various factors. And another thing that is important in what I've said is that it can also be influenced by what? Interdependencies. All these variables are interdependent on one another. Because this is very complex to capture, we need to build an economic model that will simplify this complexity. That is the reason why we need assumptions. That is why at the end of the day, if you want to specify this thing, given our assumption, we now said demand is a function of price. Ceteris paribus. All things being equal. Ceteris paribus. That is exactly what I said when I said economic reality is highly complex. It involves numerous variables and interdependencies. In order now to simplify it, we need to make assumptions. So, assumption helps us to do 4 things. It helps us to achieve 4 things. What are those things? 1, assumptions helps to simplify reality. That's number 1. Help to simplify reality. That's number 1. 2, assumptions make models testable. Number 3, assumption helps facilitate predictions. Help facilitate predictions. And 4, assumptions allow for logical consistency. These are 4 things that assumption help us to achieve. It helps us to simplify reality. By making assumptions, that's number 1 now. I'm just trying to simplify assumption. By making assumptions, economists can strip away unnecessary complexity and then focus on the core relationship that drive economic behavior. That is how it simplifies reality. It takes away all unnecessary complexities and focus on the core relationship that drive economic behavior. 2, it helps to make model testable. Assumptions allow economists to develop models that can be empirically tested using data. Yes. That is why assumptions help to make model testable. It allows economists to develop models that can be empirically tested using data. Just like I said the other time, demand is a function of price, population, income, and so on and so forth. This model, demand model, can be tested using using some data set. If we have data, we can collect data and test this model. Number 3, it helps facilitate predictions. A well-structured model with clear assumptions can be used to predict economic outcomes under different conditions. Let me repeat that again. A well-structured model with clear assumption can be used to predict economic outcomes under different conditions. Let me give an example of that. For instance, if we specify our demand model, we said, let's say that demand is a function. Let me write. Let's say that demand is a function of income, price, population. We can predict this demand. We can make prediction. We can predict the demand. How can we predict? Is to say that if we know, okay, say demand is a function of price, ceteris paribus. If the price increases by 100, and people that demand for the product increases to 1 million this year, it can predict that next year, if I have to increase this price, maybe to 1.2, definitely it's likely to reduce the quantity that will be demanded of my output, of my products. So it helps to make prediction. It facilitates predictions. So a well-structured model with clear assumptions can be used to predict economic outcomes. The last one. Assumptions help to allow for logical consistency. Who is this fellow? Forget state. It's up in the class.
We are now specialized in hospitals, family, and child care. Somebody now comes and tells you that I have a brother that's very ill. I want you to come and not medical social work. As such, you cannot infer that you know substantially what it takes to find that sense. Expected to require that question. Somebody has better qualified that. The same way, the general medical practitioner is more general. Right? So don't just assume that what am I going to do by household? So
So let's continue. Now, I said that assumptions help us to achieve 4 things. It helps to simplify reality. It helps to make model testable and facilitate predictions, as well as it allows for logical consistency. Now, the most important thing that I want to say before I end this particular session at this topic is to say that this assumption has different roles in different economics theory. Please take note. Let me repeat that again. Assumptions, the role of assumptions, it has different roles that it plays in different economics theory. Economics theory is dominated by 2 major thoughts. We have the classical economists and we have the Keynesian economists. But right now, we have what called behavioral economists. We have the classical economists, the classical economists. And 2, we have Keynesian economists. And 3, we have what we call behavioral economists. Behavioral economists. Now, different economic schools of thought use assumption in distinct ways. All these schools of thought that we're seeing on the board, classical economists, Keynesian economists, behavioral economists, use assumption in different ways, in distinct way. Let me say in distinct way. Let's take the first one, the classical economists. How do classical economists use assumptions? In the classical world, in the classical economics, they assume that wages and prices are flexible. That is one of the assumptions of classical economists. They assume that, let me write, they assume, that's the classical economists. Classical economists. They assume that, 1, price and wage. Prices and wages are flexible. That's one of the assumptions of these schools of thought, classical economists. And another important assumption under these schools of thought is what we call rational decision making. They assume that individual economic agents are rational in their decision making when making decisions. They assume that decision makers are rational. that they are rational decision makers. That is economic agents. That is assumption of the classical schools of thought. Another assumption, important assumption under the schools of thought is that they assume self-correcting markets. Self-correcting markets. What do we mean by self-correcting? What we call self-adjustment mechanism. Let's say self-adjustment mechanism. Let me put it that way. Self-adjustment mechanism or adjusting mechanism. They assume self-adjusting mechanism. That is, markets can regulate itself without any interference from governments. For instance, if you take a look at equilibrium market, equilibrium price. Equilibrium price is the price that regulates, that brings together demand and supply, that equates demand to supply. So it brings the two, it brings both demand and supply together. So a self-adjusting mechanism. These are important assumptions under these schools of thought. What about the Keynesian economists? What about the Keynesian economists? What about the Keynesian economists? What about Keynesian economists? Keynesian economists. Keynesian economists. What are the major assumptions that underlying these schools of thought? Number one, they assume that price and wage stickiness. That is one of their key assumptions. Unlike the classical, that assume that wages and price are flexible. Under the Keynesian economists, it does not believe that. The Keynesian economy believes that price and wage stickiness. Two, which is the most important assumption of these schools of thought, is that they emphasize the role of government. The role of government. That government has a role to play in the economy. That's one of their key assumptions. That government has an important role to play in any economy. What about the other schools of thought, the behavioral schools of thought? What are the assumptions, key assumption of this school of thought as well? Behavioral economists. Behavioral economists. These schools of thought, they challenge the assumption of perfect rationality. They challenge that assumption that human beings can make rational decisions. They are rational decision makers. They challenge that assumption. Rather, they challenge the assumption of perfect rationality and incorporate psychological insights. This is key to this schools of thought. They incorporate psychological insights into decision making. They believe human beings are not rational. They are irrational human beings. They can make a rational decision. They can take a rational decision. So because of that, they introduce into it, that is one of their key assumptions, psychological insight into decision making. Now, having said this, these are important role of assumption in different economic theories. What about game theory? Game theory is another theory, very important theory in economics. What is the assumption that underlines game theory? Games theory. Games theory in economics. Games theory assumes strategic behavior. That is one of their key assumptions. What do we mean by strategic behavior? Here, they depend on the action that another person has already taken. For instance, if you have two sellers in a market, seller A and seller B, and seller A increases his own price. This action that is being taken by this person will influence the action that this other person is going to take. This person will also want to increase or his or her price. You can see that there's what we call strategic behavior here, because the action of this particular individual has made this other economic agent to respond. So games theory assumes strategic behavior where agents anticipate others' actions and respond accordingly. And if this person suspects, this agent B, let's say this economic agent B, suspect that, oh, this person is likely to reduce his own price, what is going to happen? This person will also want to reduce his prices. So we can see that there's what called strategic reaction and action here that is going on. So this often happens in a market setting where behavior of particular trader or seller influences another seller. So that is an example of games theory. Now, what can we make out of the fact that, assuming we relax some of these assumptions, what's going to happen? If relaxing assumption will do it's going to lead to one particular thing. What is that thing? It's going to improve our model accuracy. That is the implication of relaxing assumption. For instance, let me give you an instance of that. Let me give an example of that. Take a look at demand function or model. We said demand is a function of price, is a function of income, is a function of population. And at the end of the day, we now say demand is a function of price, ceteris paribus. The implication of this is that the only thing that drives this demand is the price. This is highly restrictive assumption, highly restrictive. To say that the only thing that drives the price is the demand. That drives demand is the price. Another variable can as well drive this demand. So if you now relax this assumption to say that, oh no, demand is also can be influenced by price and income and population simultaneously, we have improved our model, because this one actually reflects the reality. It reflects the reality than assuming that the only thing that drives our demand is the price. That is exactly what we're saying. So economic model evolve by relaxing on realistic assumption and incorporating more real world complexity. It leads to improvement in our model, economic model. So we have example of refined assumptions. There are some assumptions that are refined in economics. For instance, we have what we call relaxing perfect information. One of the assumptions in the economy is that information is perfect. There's a perfect information under market structure. We said under market structure, we say that, oh, information is perfect, but If we relax this assumption, what's going to happen? Relaxing perfect information by incorporating what? By incorporating asymmetry information model. Asymmetry information model. So these are refined assumptions we have in economics. Example of that is Akerlof, market for lemon. And of course, this aspect of economics theory says
Sir,
that
I have a
good
question.
market, bad goods drives away good, markets. And that is exactly what we are experiencing in Nigeria. If you take a look at what is happening, if there are good products, some people will fake these products as if you are buying the same products that were being made initially. Before you know it, the entire market will be filled up with fake products. At the end of the day, that fake product now will now takes away all the goods product. We call it market for lemons. This is an argument that is being formulated by a renowned economist called Akerlof. Anyway, it's not our interest to go into the details of Akerlof. I just want to tell you that there are some refined assumptions we have included in our economics theory. Now, let's now move straight to today's business. I just tried to finish what I started last week. But today, I want to talk about an important topic that is very critical to this particular course. And what is that course? What is that topic? I want to talk about the major area of specialization in economics. I want to talk about major areas of specialization in economics. Economics has a special areas. And majorly, we have about 4 of them. There are many, but I just want to focus on 4 of these major areas of specialization. In economics. Major area of specialization in economics. So the first one is development economics. Development economics. Why the second one is international economics. International economics. The third one is energy and environment economics. Energy and environment economics. The fourth one is institutional economics. Institutional economics. Now, let's try to explain each of these areas of specialization in economics. Let's take the first one. Development economics let me take the first one. The first one is development economics. Development economics is a branch of economics that focuses on improving the economic well-being and quality of life of people. Mostly in developing countries. Let me repeat that again. It's a branch of economics. It's a branch of economics that focuses on improving the economic well-being, and quality of life of people in developing countries. The next question that comes to mind is that what are those issues that this specialized area of economics addresses? Development economics, good. What are those issues that it addresses? It addresses key issues that related to economic growth, poverty reduction, problem of inequality, and policy that are needed to improve living standard. It focuses on 1, economic growth, 2, poverty and inequality. It focuses on policy interventions. Also, we can include sustainable development. And also we can include human capital or human development. 5, human development. The first one is that economy focuses on economic growth. It focuses on poverty and inequality. It focuses on policy interventions. It focuses on sustainable development, and it focuses on human development. Let me explain it and, all this area of focus of development economies. Now, the first one is economic growth. The key area of focus of development economies is economic growth. It studies how economies grow over time. The first one is economic growth, e.g. Here, development economy studies how economies, that is countries, grow over time by considering factors such as capital accumulation, 2, labor force participation or expansion, labor force expansion or participation, and focuses on technological progress. Technological progress. Technological progress. These are factors that drives economic growth of any nation. Capital accumulation, labor force expansion, technological progress. Growth is seen as necessary for improving living standards, but it's not sufficient to address problem of inequality. Take note of that. Growth is seen as necessary for improving living standards, but it's not sufficient to address that problem of inequality. Now, let's take the second one now, which is another key area of focus of development economies: poverty and inequality. Poverty and inequality. So anything that talks about growth, how can Nigeria grow? What can Tinubu administration do to make Nigerian economies to grow? We are simply saying something about what? Development economies. Another key area of focus of development economies is what we call poverty and inequality. This is another major issue in any economy, be it developed or developing. Be it developed or developing. These are issue. These two that we're seeing here, they are major issue. They are major issue in any economy. It doesn't respect your stages of development, whether you are developed or you are developing. Even in the US experience inequality as well as the poverty. It's just that it's relative. We're talking of poverty in the US, it may not be the same poverty when it comes to developing world. But what we are saying here is that these are issues of development economies. Now, poverty and inequality, central concern in development economies are how do we reduce poverty and how do we address economic disparity within and between countries. That is the problem of development economies. It's concerned about the fact that how can we reduce this poverty that is rampant, prevalent poverty that we have in this country? How can we reduce it? And how can we address economic disparity within and between countries? So it then involves looking at policies that target income redistribution, education, health improvement. That is why if government wants to alleviate people's poverty as well as reduce inequality, government needs to target something. Government needs to do something about income redistribution. Income redistribution. Government needs to do something about it. You have to take from the rich and give to the poor. Also, governments have to do something about improving education and health. This is another important component of policy intervention that government can embark upon to alleviate or to reduce poverty and reduce inequality. Another key area of focus of development economies is human development. Human development. Number 3, human development. This is another area of focus of development economies. Human development. Because beyond GDP growth, human development focuses on increasing access to education, healthcare, and basic living standard. So human development emphasizes quality of life over just material wealth. It emphasizes quality
Sir, I have
of
a
life.
question.
Let me finish my class, please. I will answer your question. Let me finish my class. I will answer your question, please. Is that taken?
Yes, sir.
Quality of life. Thank you. Quality of life, and that means human development. It emphasizes how do we improve quality of life over just what? Material wealth. Over material wealth. That is what it preaches. Human development. We're talking about human development. What we're saying is that let's promote quality of life over just material wealth. So it means it goes beyond increasing GDP. It goes beyond increasing GDP. It goes beyond just increasing your GDP. No, it goes beyond it. It means there is need for a country to improve the quality of life of its people or of our people. It's when country improve the quality of life of the people within that particular economy that matter most than just accumulating material wealth. If you are growing your GDP and you do not improve the quality of life of people, so this aspect of development is what? Development economy is what? Is at fault. It's faulty. It's faulty. So that is what we are witnessing in Nigeria today. So another thing that is important is sustainable development. Sustainable development. Sustainable development. This is another area of focus of development economies. This is another area of focus of development economies. Sustainable development. And what sustainable development? That's number 4. Sustainable development. What do you mean by sustainable development? Sustainable development simply means integration of economic sustainability, integration of environment sustainability, with economic growth, or with economic development. That's it. That's meaning of sustainable development. And what exactly are we saying when talking about sustainable development? Is that how can you grow your economy without polluting the environment, without damaging the environment? Because the cost of growth, let me repeat, the cost of growth usually is that most of the countries that you see in the world today that call themselves developed world, they were able to grow. As they are growing, so also they were damaging the environment. So they cannot decouple their growth from their environment. But now the only team now in development economy is what we call sustainable development. Sustainable development simply means that how can we grow our economy without damaging the environment? That is why we talk about integration. We talk about integration of what? Of environment sustainability and economic development. So you have to decouple your growth from your environment. So that's what we call sustainable development. Another area of focus of development economy is what we call policy intervention. Now that we've been able to identify all these problems, another thing that development economy is concerned about is that how can we solve this problem using policy? That's why we call it policy intervention. How can this problem be resolved using policy instruments? We call it policy intervention. Policy intervention. Interventions. We have identified that in the economy, there's poverty and inequality. We have equally identified that economic growth is not taking place, is not happening. If you equally, observe that we do not emphasize quality of life. We are only particular about accumulation of material wealth. Again, we are damaging the environment at the expense. We are growing at the expense of the environment. That is sustainable development. Now, another thing that development economy also is concerned about is policy intervention. Development economy focus on the role of government policies. The role of government policy. How can government improve on all these aspects? So development economy focus on the role of government, foreign aid, international organization in promoting development. That is why we talk about this issue of microfinance. Microfinance is just some of the program to alleviate poverty, to improve the quality of life of people. But if it may not be happening, if you take a look at what is happening in Nigeria, but that is the intention of setting up, having microfinance. Infrastructural development, social safety nets, trade policy. These are all policy measures that government can use to improve the condition and the welfare of the people. Now, what are examples of key theory that underlines development economies? What are those theories? There are some theories that underline that in economics, for instance, if you are doing development economics, there are some theories that you will learn under development economics. An example of that theory is one, modernization theory. Modernization theory. Modernization theory. Modernization theory. Modernization theory. One, we have what we call modernization theory. Modernization theory. Modernization theory. That's number one. Number two, we have what we call dependency theory. Dependency theory. Dependency theory. And number three, we have what we call neoliberalism. Neoliberalism. Liberalism. All these theories are taught under development economics. If you are doing development economics as a specialized topic in economics, you are going to treat all these topics. We call it the first one is what we call modernization theory, dependency theory, and neoliberalism. They are all key theories under development economics. So what is modernization theory? Modernization theory simply suggests that countries develop in a linear process. That's what it means. It suggests that country develop in a linear process. Let me write that. And what do we mean by this? That is modernization theory. Modernization. Look at the word. From the word modernization theory, it means country. It suggests the theory that is MT, modernization theory, MT, modernization theory, suggests that country should develop. Countries should develop in a what? In a linear process. Linear process. Underline that. Linear process. What the meaning of that? It means you moving from traditional to modern stages of development. It means moving from traditional to modern stages of development. Modern stages of development. That's what it means, modernization theory. For instance, moving from agricultural economy to manufacturing economy, from manufacturing economy to industrialization economies, from that to service-based economy, just like what we are experiencing today, ICT. So that is what we call linear process. So that theory suggests that countries should develop in a linear process. So moving from traditional to modern stages of development. Moving from agric, for instance, to manufacturing, to industrial, to service. That is linear process. Another important theory under development economy is what we call dependency theory. Yes. Dependency theory. Dependency theory. Dependency theory. Dependency theory. Dependency theory. Dependency theory. What is the argument of this theory? It argues that developing countries are kept in a state of underdevelopment due to their historical dependence on wealthy nations. That is, the argument of dependency theory is that Africa, for instance, are kept in this state of underdevelopment due to our what? Historical dependence on the developed world. That's what we call dependency theory. All these things are taught under development economics. Dependency theory simply tells us that developing countries are kept in a state of underdevelopment due to their historical dependence on wealthy nations. The last on this example that I want to give is what we call neoliberalism. 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 This one advocates for free markets. It advocates free markets, deregulation, privatization. That is what it advocates, privatization. They are all doing, converging to the same thing. What it means is that government should play a lesser role in any economy. Rather, forces of demand and supply should be allowed to play major role in any economy. That's what I call free market. Means demand and supply should be allowed to play their role. But government should not play any important or prominent role. Government should just be a referee watching how the game is being played. But the game is going to be played majorly by the demand and supply. So we call it free market. Deregulation. Regulation means government is playing important role. Deregulation means government is playing passive role. So privatization, allow private sector to play major role in any economy. Government should not play important role in the economy. They are all converging to the same idea, saying that is what we call neoliberalism. All these things are taught under development economics. Before I proceed, if you have any question, please raise your question and let me answer it. Raise your question. Let me answer it. If you have any question.
Sir,
Yes.
what you said dependency theory, like I don't understand dependency theory.
Look at the word. Look at the word dependency. When you depend on people for something. So what this one is saying is that
I apply for
those of us in developing world, we depend so much on the developed world because of our historical antecedent. These colonize us. That is more reason why we depend, our development depends because they are the one that, colonize us. So this dependency theory simply argues that developing countries are kept in a state of underdevelopment due to our historical dependence on wealthy nations. Look at what is happening in this African country now. Burkina Faso, Niger, and some other African countries like that, Guinea, Bissau, that have been, the military took over their, their government. The military took over because they believe that the so-called civilian government, they are not doing well, and they are not doing it because they attached so much to their colonizers. That is why French country, France now, is being, driven away, in most of this Francophone country, that we don't want French again. We don't want France again, because they believe they are the problem of their underdevelopment because of their historical attachment to these wealthy nations. Is that clear? Yes.
Can you explain neoliberalism again?
Any question? Any question?
Yes, I have this
Can you
question.
explain neoliberalism again?
Hello? Hello.
Yes, sir. I have a question.
Please ask.
Okay, so it's under
Talking about
neoliberalism.
Yes.
All right, so you made some examples. You said some.
So I have a question.
Ask.
Hello?
Yes, ask a question if you want to ask a question.
Okay, sir. You were talking about relaxing theory. I did not quite get you in that place when you were talking about relaxing theory. When you were talking about
Relaxing assumption. What we are saying is that,
okay, yes, relaxing assumption.
Yes, what we are saying is that what I'm trying to say there is that, you see, most of what we do in economies, we make assumptions, and those assumptions, if you take a look at it, it does not make serious sense at times, because it does not actually reflect the complexity of the real world situation. Let me give an instance. Most of the things we do in economy, say assuming two nations, assuming two individuals. Is it possible for us to have two individuals in the world? No. But because we want to simplify the complexity, we now say, let's assume two individuals exist in a world. This is a very deceptive assumption. Just like what I said the other time about demand. If you say demand is a function of price, is it only the price that drives quantity demanded? There are other things that drive demand. But because we want to simplify real complexity of the real world situation, we now say, let's assume. What we are now saying that if you relax those assumptions, what are we trying to do now? We are trying to improve our economic model. We're trying to show the real issue that is affecting the real world. But if you make those restrictive assumptions, you are simply telling us that, for instance, just like I said, it's not only the price that drives the quantity demanded of a product. There could be other reasons where the quantity demanded of a product, that can affect the quantity demanded of a product, not necessarily the price. So relaxing the assumption is saying that instead of saying quantity demand is a function of price, if we now said quantity demanded of a product is being influenced by price, income, meaning that if you relax it, that is not only the price that drives quantity demanded, other factors also drives it. That is, we are relaxing the assumption. We are relaxing the assumption. Yes, another question?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Please, my question is commercialization the same thing as free market?
Is it as privatization? Is it as privatization? Commercialization, yes.
Excuse me, sir. Question.
Yes, ask.
Please, when you were explaining the development theory and neoliberalism, I didn't quite get.
Neoliberalism.
Yes, development theory.
Yes.
I didn't quite understand the explanation.
Dependency theory. Dependency theory. Look at the word dependent. Dependent. It means the argument here is that developing countries are Africa, for instance. I said what this theory is saying is that we are in this state of underdevelopment because we are so much attached to our colonizer. So that is deliberately, they are the one that kept us perpetually in this state of underdevelopment. We are not developing because we are historically attached to them. I get to the point now. That's why I call dependency theory. That is meaning.
Okay.
You are not developing because. Yes, ask.
So for the game theory, so out of if seller A increases their price, why would seller B does want to decrease their price to attract more customers or consumers to sell more goods?
You see, my dear, thank you so much. You see, what we are saying is that game theory is about strategic behavior. I want to take my action is being influenced by what my opponent does. If my opponent reduces his price, how will I react to that price reduction? If it increases the price, you see, that's the fact that you are watching your opponent, that's a strategic behavior already. That's meaning of game theory. That's what game theory does. Just strategic. That is, whatever action I'm going to take, I'm not just taking an action. It's being influenced by what my opponent does. I get my point.
Yes, sir.
Let me give an instance. Let me give an instance now. You are in a room, in your best place. You are in your room. But there's one of your colleagues. The guy is saying, I want to make first class. And the guy reads a lot. And you also have the intention of making first class. You'll be using the guy as, he has gone to library. Let me also go to library. You can see that there's a strategic interaction there now. Because what he's doing is affecting you. If he's sleeping, he's now sleeping. Let me go and sleep too. At least so that's exactly what we are talking about. What is it? Your action that you are taking is dependent on on the action of your competitor or somebody that you see as a competitor. That is exactly what we're saying. That's what we call game theory, strategic behavior, strategic interactions. Another question?
Yes, sir.
Please do, because this is the last question I'm going to take so that I can continue. Yes.
Sir, what are the differences between neoliberalism and what are the
Hello?
The difference between neoliberalism and capitalism?
It means the same thing. Capitalism and liberalism. They are bird of the same feather. Yes. Okay. They are the same thing. Capitalism. They're just using grammar. Look at new liberalism. It's everything about liberalism, neoliberalism. It's about capitalism. Is that taken now? Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much. Yeah, let's continue. Now, I want to talk about another important aspect, branch of economics, which I talk about, area of specialization in economics. I want to talk about what I call international economics. International economics. Look at the word international economics. International economics. We have discussed extensively on development economics. We now want to talk about international economics. This is another important branch or area in economics.
Mom, I haven't paid money.
I expect you guys to mute yourself. Look at this person, Yakub Salim. Anyway, there's no problem. I will remove you. There's no problem. Yes. So that you don't disturb the flow of the class. Yes. Now, let me talk about international economics. International economics. This is another important branch of economics. Now, international economics examines economic interactions between countries. Take note of that. It examines economic interactions. Economic interactions between countries, including trade, investment, monetary relations. Like now that Nigeria is borrowing money every day, that's monetary relation. It's about international economics. So international economy examines economic interaction between countries, including trade, investment, and monetary interactions. So international economics also look at how country exchanges or how countries exchange goods, services, capital, labor. It examines how country exchange goods, services, capital, labor, and the impact of such exchanges on their economic performance. The impact of such on their economic performance. For instance, Nigeria trade with UK, Nigeria trade with Ghana, Nigeria trade with Togo, Nigeria trade with Japan. These are all, everything is, it comes under international economics. Because whether you are moving capital, you are moving labor across this country or between you and another country, you are all dealing or involving in what we call international economics. So it involves economic interactions between countries. And you want to see how does that interaction impact on your economic performance. If I'm trading with UK, if I'm trading with Ghana, how would that interaction, how would that transaction affect my economy? That's the whole essence of interacting with other countries in other part of the world. If you are just interacting and you are not gaining anything from that interaction, that means there's no point interacting with but the whole essence of that is to want to see how that will impact on your economic performance. Now, what are key areas of focus under international economics? What are key areas of focus under it?
What's wrong with this? Connect now. Okay.
What are key areas of focus? What are key areas of focus under international economies. Because if you take a look at what we said under development economy, we talk about economic growth, we talk about poverty and inequality and the rest. Now, the key area of focus in economies, international economies, number one, international trade. International trade. Let me call it IT, international trade. IT, international trade. One of the key areas of focus of international economy is IT. Under international trade, we study the movement of goods and services across borders. We study the movement of goods and services across borders. That we call it international trade. And topic under it, under this particular international trade, is when we talk about trade theory, trade policy, trade agreement. Talk about trade theories. Example of trade theory is comparative advantage. Comparative advantage. That's an example of trade theory. We also talk about trade policy. Trade policy. What do you mean by example of that trade policy? We talk about tariff or quota. Talk about tariffs and quota. Quota. We'll talk about trade agreement. Trade agreement. Trade agreement. Trade agreements. If you talk about under that trade, I'm talking about WTO. WTO, that is World Trade Organization. Or NAFTA. 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 NAFTA means North America Free Trade Agreement. And so on and so forth. NAFTA. It means it means international trade. The way I explain it here has three important components. The first component is what? Trade theories. The second one is what? Trade policy. The third one is what? Trade agreements. This is accommodated within what? Within international trade, IT. Another important area of focus of international economies is what we call international finance. International finance. International finance. International finance. International finance. International finance. This is another key area of focus in economies. International finance. International, let me call IF, international finance. International finance focuses on the flow of capital between countries. Trade. I said, what did I say about trade? It talks about what? Movement of goods and services across border. That's what we call trade. International finance, look at finance, focuses on the flow of capital between countries. Exchange rates, foreign investment, global financial markets. These are all issues that are treated under international finance. Or we talk about capital controls, you talk about financial crisis, you talk about currency stabilization. These are all harbor under international finance. So that is an important area of focus in international economies, international finance. Another area of focus in international finance is what we call international trade is globalization. 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 That is another area of focus in international economies. Globalization. Globalization, this analyzes the increasing interconnectedness of the world economy. Interconnectedness.
Sorry, sir. Please come again.
I said globalization analyzes the increasing interconnectedness of the world economy. And that has to do with what we are experiencing today. Use of iPhone, use of these are all globalization instruments, tools, interconnectedness. You don't need to, for instance, look at what is happening now. You are at your comfort of your home. I'm here lecturing. That means this is what we call globalization. You don't have to meet at a physical location for us to deliver our lecture. This platform now, the same thing I'm going to tell you if I meet you physically is exactly what I'm teaching you now. So this is globalization. So it analyzes the increasing interconnectedness of the world economies. So it investigates the causes and consequences of globalization, including how will it impact on trade, labor market, economic inequality. This globalization thing, this is exactly what we use it for. We want to see how it will improve our trade, how it's going to improve our labor market, how it will improve our economic inequality. There are some jobs that people do now that they are online jobs. They are working for countries in the US and they are in Nigeria. And they are collecting their salary every month. So this is what we call globalization. You don't need to go to the US before you work. You can be in your country and be working for with US. You can be working for companies in France. So these are all tools, instruments of globalization. So it talks about interconnectedness. So that is all these things come. These are key area of focus in international economies. The last one I want to talk about here is balance of payment. Balance of payment. This is another important area of focus in international economies. What do you mean of balance of payment? A record of all financial transactions. Between a country and the rest of the world is a record of all financial transactions between a country and the rest of the world, including trade balance, capital flows, foreign aid, and so on and so forth. So economists study how this affects a country's, our balance of payment. We study how does this thing affect our economy and the currency value, our value of our currency. How does it affect? These are all, houses under balance of payment issue. So these are another key area of focus of international economies. There are some also theories that underlines these economies, international economies. Just like I mentioned under development, I talk about the dependency theory. I also talk about modernization theory. I talk the same way. I talk about neoliberalism. Now, under international economies, we also have some theory that underlines international economies. And number one is what we call Ricardian theory of comparative advantage. Ricardian theories under it. Key theories that underline international economies. That underpin international. The first one is what we call Ricardian. The first one is what we call Ricardian theory of comparative advantage. Theories. The first one is what we call Ricardian theory of comparative advantage. Ricardian theory of comparative advantage. That's number one. And what does this theory tell us? This theory suggests that countries should specialize in producing goods where they have a lower opportunity cost. where they have a lower opportunity cost. Countries should specialize in producing goods where they have a lower opportunity cost. This of course will lead to what? Mutual gains from trading. From trade. It is going to lead to mutual gain. Another one is Ricardian. Theory of comparative advantage. Theory of comparative advantage. The second one is what we call Escher-Ohlin. Escher-Ohlin theory. Escher-Ohlin theory.
Can you spell it?
Yes. That's what I'm writing on the board. Maybe I should just spell it. It's H-E-C-K S-C-H-E-R. Escher. Let me repeat that again. H-E-C K Escher is S-C-H-E-R. Escher. Ohlin is, you put hyphen after Escher, put hyphen, that is dash. Ohlin is O-H-L-I-N. Escher-Ohlin.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Escher-Ohlin theory. This one focuses on Escher-Ohlin. This one focuses on how a country's relative factors endowment like labor capital, land, determine its comparative advantage in trade. How does your factors of production determine your comparative advantage in trade? That's what Escher-Ohlin theory talks about. So it focuses on how a country's relative. Escher-Ohlin theory focuses on how a country's relative factor endowment, like land, labor, capital, determine its comparative advantage. In trade. For instance, just like look at what is happening. How we have abundant deposit. We have abundant deposit of crude oil in Nigeria. How these are our resources? How does it, how did it determine our comparative advantage in trade? That is what Escher-Ohlin talks about. It focuses on how a country's relative factors of production determine its comparative advantage. And the third one I want to talk about is what we call monetary theories. Monetary theories. This one studied the role of exchange rate, interest rate, monetary policy, anything that has to do with exchange rate, interest rate, monetary policy. They are all about under monetary theories. So these are theories that underline international trade. These are theories that underline international trade.
Sir, please, what do you say monetary theory is?
Monetary theory, I said, study the role of exchange rate, interest rate, monetary policy in the global economy. Study the role of exchange rate, interest rate, monetary policy in the global economy. Now, another area that I want to talk about, which is also very important, is energy and environment economy. This is another specialized area in economics. Energy and environment economies. This is another specialized energy and environment economies. Energy environment economy focuses on the relationship between economic activity and the environment. It focuses on the relationship between economic activities and environment. Energy and environment economies. Energy and environment economy focuses on the relationship between economic activity and the environment, particularly in the context of energy use, climate change, three, sustainable resource management, This area aims to provide economic solutions to environmental problems while promoting energy security and sustainability. It aims to provide economic solutions to environmental problems while promoting energy security and sustainability. So what are the key areas of focus? Don't worry, I'm going to give you this note as soon as we finish our classes. I'm going to drop the note. Is that clear? I'm going to give you the one for last week. I'm going to give you to your course rep. The course rep should relate with me after the class. I will drop all my notes with you. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Now, what are the key areas? What are the key areas of focus of energy and environment economies? That is the next question I want to ask. What are the key areas of focus? That is, if I'm studying energy economy, what are those things am I supposed to learn or know under that course, specialized area of economics? What am I supposed to know? That is exactly what we are talking about. Key area of focus. Number one is what we call energy economics. That's number one. Area of focus is energy economics. And this energy economics examines production, consumption, and distribution of energy resources. That is what it centers upon. It centers on energy economics, examines production, consumption, and distribution of energy resources. Consumption and distribution of energy resources. That is what it examines, energy economics. If somebody tells you, oh, what are you studying in the UK? I'm reading energy economics. That means what this person is examining is the production, consumption, and distribution of energy resources, including fossil fuel. Example of fossil fuel is oil, coal, natural gas, and renewable energy like solar, wind, hydro, thermal, nuclear, and so on and so forth. These are things that energy economics examines. Energy economics examines production, consumption, distribution of energy resources, which includes fossil fuel. Fossil fuel are highly environmental damaging resources, energy resources like oil, coal, natural gas. The ones that are environmental friendly are renewables like solar, wind, hydro. So under energy economics also, it analyzes pricing, regulation, and policy impact of all these things on energy markets. These are things that are done under energy economics. It analyzes pricing, regulations, policies impact on energy market. Another key area of focus of energy and environment economics is what we call climate change and environmental policy. Climate change and environmental policy. This is another key area of focus. Environmental policy. This is another key area of focus of energy and environment economies. This one focuses on economic impact of climate change, the role of government policies on how to reduce it. That is the role of government policy in mitigating the impact of climate change. So an example of the role the government can play is carbon pricing. Carbon pricing, subsidy for clean energy, and so on and so forth. Government can decide to give subsidy for companies that are, keen to clean energy resources, like renewable. So these are area of focus of energy economies. Another area of focus of energy economies is what we call resource management. Resource management. This one deals with allocation and management of natural resources. This one deals with allocation and management of natural resources. So it includes managing renewable resources like fisheries, forests, and minerals and fossil fuel. Anything that has to do with resource management comes under resource management. These are areas of focus under energy and environmental policy. Another area of focus of energy and environmental policy is what we call externalities. 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 Anything that has to do with pollution, polluting the pollution of the environment, environmental damaging activity, they all come under externalities. So economic activity that have unintended side effects, such as pollution, are very central to this issue of externality. At times you are producing and your production has a damaging, is causing damaging impact. That's a environmental, is the activity that in your, if you are for this place, when you are producing and your production is environmental damaging, so that is Zoom. So that is externality. And the key area, example of key theories under this particular branch of economy or specialized area of economies is what we call environmental goodness curve. Environmental goodness curve. Environmental goodness curve. EKC, we call it EKC, environmental goodness curve. EKC, environmental Kuznets curve. Environmental Kuznets curve. This one simply suggests that as economies grow, environmental degradation increases up to a point, but then decrease as the economic matures. What that one is simply saying is that when the economy is growing, it tends to damage the environment, pollute the environment. But once the economy gets to a certain point, the environment that is damaging will start declining, because then this country would have gotten enough to buy technology that will reduce the quantity of the damaging, the activity that is damaging the environment. Would have been able to secure it ourselves technology that will reduce the impact of this, environmental damaging, thing. So that is the meaning of environmental goodness curve. That is what it does. It simply suggests that as economy grows, environmental degradation, that is the way you are damaging, the way you will be damaging the environment is going to increase. But after a certain point, it will decline. So that is meaning, because at that point, you can afford cleaner technology. At that point, you can be able to afford cleaner technology. Just like what is happening in the developing world now. Because it wants to grow, we'll be damaging our environment, using some damaging resources like fossil fuel. But as we get to that certain point, certain stage of our development, what's going to happen to our damaging? It will start falling, because at that point we can afford cleaner technology. Another important theory under this particular area of specialization, energy and environment, what we call quartz theory. The quartz theory. This theory proposes that private negotiation can lead to efficient environment outcomes when property rights are well defined. It proposes that private negotiation can lead to efficient environmental outcomes when property rights are well defined and transaction costs are lower. What it means is that, for instance, if you are damaging my environment because you are producing a certain product, we can go to, two of us can come into private negotiation. Mr. Man, if you damage my environment up to this tone, you are going to pay me so amount of money. But if you don't damage up to this point, you won't pay any money. That, of course, is an agreement. It's a private negotiation. So it can lead to an efficient environmental outcome. So that is exactly what quasi theorem is all about. The last on the list that I want to talk about before we close this class is institutional economics, which is the last area of specialized area in economics. Institutional economics. Institutional economics examines the role of institutions, formal or informal. How does institution influence economic outcome? So here I want to talk about the formal and informal one. So institutional economy examines the role of institutions. And how do we define institution in this context? Institution can be defined as formal rules like laws, regulations, and informal rules. What are informal rules? Culture, norms, traditions, convention. Shape economic behavior and outcomes. Shape economic behavior and outcomes. That is the meaning of institution. How does formal rules and informal rules shape economic behavior and outcomes? So, under institutional economics, we investigate how institutions evolve over time and their impact on economic performance. That's what we do under institutional economics. We investigate how institutions evolve over time and their impact on economic performance. So what are the key areas of focus? What are the key areas of focus? Key area of focus of institutional economics. Number one, property rights. Property rights. Number two, market functioning. Market functioning. Number three, governance and corruption. Governance and corruption. Number four, transaction costs. Transaction costs. These are areas of focus of institutional economics. Let me repeat that again. The area of focus of institutional economics are property rights, market functioning, governance and corruption, and transaction costs. So, under property right, it talks about the assignment and protection of property rights. Because these are very fundamental to institutional economics. Protection of property rights. So, clear property rights leads to better resource allocation, investment, and economic growth. When you have a clear property rights, it leads to better resource allocation, investment, and economic growth. Another important thing that we have to know here is what we call market functioning. This area studies how institutions shape market outcomes. It talks about how institutions shape market outcomes, such as the role of government in regulating markets, the presence of market failures like monopoly, information asymmetry. These are signs of market failure. If you have a monopoly, information asymmetry, these are signs of. So the role of government, how does government regulate all these things? This is an area of focus. This is another area of focus under institutional economy. Another one is governance and corruption. Anything that has to do with corruption and governance is also key area of focus under institutional economies. For instance, institutional economies explores how governance structure like political system, legal framework affect economic outcomes. Again, it talks about how corruption, inefficient legal system, weak institution, how they can affect development and economic efficiency. These are all area of focus under institutional economies. Another area of focus is transaction costs. These are costs that is associated with when you're making an exchange. If you are making an exchange, the cost that is associated with it is what we call transaction costs, such as when you're searching for information, negotiating contracts, enforcing agreements. All these are leads to transactional costs. So high transactional costs can prevent efficient market and hinder economic growth. Lastly, before I finish my topic, this discussion on my topic, I want to talk about the key theories under this particular area of, economy, specialized area of economy, institutional economies. I want to talk about NIE, New Institutional Economies, NIE, New Institutional Economies, and theories of institutional change. What do I? These are theories under institutional economies, NIE, New Institutional Economies. New Institutional Economies focuses on how institutions shape economic outcomes by examining cost of transaction, the role of information, the role of legal and political framework, and the rest. So these are things that are being, discussed under the institutional economies. And lastly, theory of institutional change. Theory of institutional change studies how institutions evolve and adapt, often through historical and path-dependent processes. So often through historical and path-dependent processes. This includes the role of institution in facilitating or obstructing economic development. So these are areas of specialization in economics. To recap, there are 4 major areas of specialization in economics. We have development economies, we have international economies, we have energy and environment economies, and lastly, we have institutional economies. These are all areas of institutional economy. And for each of these areas of economies, let me quickly recap. For development economies, the area of focus, there are about 5 of them that I mentioned. I talk about economic growth. I talk about poverty and inequality. I talk about human development. I talk about sustainable development. I talk about policy interventions. And there are certain theories that underline that development economies. I talk about modernization theory. I talk about dependency theory. I talk about neoliberalism. The second area of specialization that I talk about international economies. And the area of focus under international economy is what we call international trade, international finance, globalization, and balance of payment. And the theory that underlines that. I talk about the Ricardian theory of comparative advantage. I talk about Eshaoli theory. I talk about monetary theory. Another area of specialization that I talk about in under this topic is energy and environment economy.
Wait, I've done
The
the course
area,
registration. I've not done. Oh,
the
shit,
area
I've
of
that
specialization
one.
also.
But wait, before you.
The area of specialization also, I talked about energy economies. I talked about climate change and environmental policy. I talk about resource management. I talk about externality. And the key theories that underlines that is environmental goodness curve, as well as quasi theory. And lastly, I talk about institutional economies. Under institutional economies, I talk about area of focus under institutional economy. I talk about property rights, market functioning, governance and corruption, and transaction costs. And lastly, I also talk about the theory that underlines that. I talk about new institutional economies and theory of institutional change. So on this note, we have finished our topic 3. So in the absence of no question, I want to end my class. So by His grace, I don't know if you're still going to meet this month, but if you're still going to meet, I'm going to communicate to your respective course reps. On this note, I want to tell you all that thank you for your attention and thank you for listening. So good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
sir. Sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.